What happens when you give a media personality and a sex therapist a podcast? You get Spill the Tea, a bold, unfiltered space where no topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the messy, hilarious, and heartbreaking realities of life. Will Nash and Maria Orrego serve up real talk with expert insight, hot takes, and a whole lot of tea.
You're going to go vote right after this.
I'm literally finishing the Spill the Tea record and heading straight to the polling station near me, which is, I think, about 7 minutes away by car.
Amazing.
So it's close. It's at a church, and we're just gonna go there. I'm curious to see how long it's gonna take me, because I've been hearing mixed things. I think you were actually telling me offline that you went first thing this morning, and even though it was busy, it moved pretty quickly.
Honestly, I went first thing this morning because I thought I would be totally alone. Because usually on voting days, it's like me and one other person. And yeah, it was packed. I actually stood in line. I will say though, like between like getting there and leaving was 15 minutes. So it was not a long time at all. It was just surprising the amount of people that were voting today. And it was so exciting to see so many people actually voting.
I remember you sent me a voice note this morning, not this message, a voice note message this morning. And you had told me that when you said it was busy and I hadn't been yet, I was kind of like biting my nails a little bit. But then I thought about it, the perspective, and yes, that is a good thing. We've heard all these horrible stats in the past about the fact that not enough of us are using our voice and having our say, whether it's a federal election, which, by the way, we're actually recording this, if you couldn't tell, on the federal election day before we know the results. And we don't typically get into the political side of things here. Not that we're really getting into the political side of things, despite talking about our days and when we're going to vote, that sort of a thing. But we want to chat about just some of the stress and how it affects your mental health. And, specifically talking a lot about how it affects everyone. My experience, how it affects someone LGBT, how it affects someone queer, because there's a lot of divisiveness, not just here in Canada, but in the US. And I think that I reached out to you with this topic and I said, because you've actually written about this topic in your column before. And I remember reading, like, off of the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that. And then that combined with conversations I've been having, ones that I wanted to have, ones that I didn't enjoy having, ones that I was forced to have. I just felt like it was an important topic. I really felt that it was something that was worth chatting about. And I feel like so many people in every community, but I mean, I can only speak of what I know, but in the LGBT community, really struggling, really suffering, feeling that stress, anxiety, affecting our mental health, with specifically this election. So yes, it's a great thing. I can't wait to see the results in terms of how many people went out to the polls. I love that. No matter what comes of this, that is already a plus.
Yeah, I agree. I have that too. It is very stressful. It's a very stressful time, I think, for Canada and for the US, unfortunately. And we haven't really seen this as much in Canada, which is interesting because I've never been asked before so many political questions in sessions. And I've never been asked to write about how politics affects mental health, at least not here, right? So it's been interesting to see the effects it has on obviously the community, but also on couples and families and the conversations that are happening right now that just seem very big and heavy. I know I don't want to say the budget isn't heavy, but when we talk about finances, realistically, not a lot of us are passionate about finances, right? But the topics that are being spoken about now, they're heavy and they're stressful, and they're also attacking a lot of people's personal beliefs and personal identity. And I think that that's important to talk about because it affects everything and everyone in a very different way. And we do need to be respectful of what we're talking about. And I'm not sure that that's happening right now.
Respect is a key word. And I think that, and I know we're recording on the day of the federal election here. However, one thing I will say is even when we were watching our neighbors to the south in their recent election and the results came out and they were what they were, and I even found then that I was like, okay, I don't know if it's the way that I'm taking in the information on my feed. And I'm not talking about from the media, I'm talking about from like friends or associates or people that we've had a mutual following of over the years. I've really been surprised and almost like, oh, I didn't necessarily know that that was your take, or in terms of some of the messaging that people are putting out on social media. And I'm not talking saying that you went to go vote. I mean, you did that awesome story this morning on ours, like not posts like that. I posts that are very, very clear on where you're standing. And then sometimes I look at the individual that posts those sort of whether it's a Instagram story or something on TikTok or Reels, and I'm like, okay, that's based on who you are, I'm surprised and maybe a little taken aback by it because, like, I don't know if we're reading the same sort of credible information that's out there, and it can be hard. And, we're so connected to social media, we're so addicted to our phones. I don't know though. I'll be following what happens, but I might be trying to take some breaks.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. But I love that you said credible as well, because I think a lot of what we're hearing, unfortunately, is that like buzzword fake news, where we are hearing an abundant amount of misinformation from everything and everyone, and it's scary, right? Because we don't actually know what's true or what's not true, especially with like the rise of like artificial intelligence. There's so much going around right now that we don't know anymore like what is posted on social media or on our feeds on TikTok, on Instagram, whatever it is. And Facebook, don't even get me started. There's just so much, and I can't, like, I would be scared right now to even go on Reddit, to be honest with you, to see like what the stuff is that people are talking about. But I think that idea of like being like looking for stuff that is credible, looking for facts and not opinion, right? I think that's really important when you're making these decisions, of actually looking at what the reality of what's going on is, and not allowing yourself to get into that tornado of chaos of information that at the end of the day kind of makes us all a bit like fanatical instead of actually like knowing what's happening in our country.
Fanatical, and I would also even go as far as saying trigger reactive. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that I'm immune to that. I've been guilty of that as well. But I would like to think, and I'm not perfect, I've made my mistakes. I've come across articles on my feed, and then I went to look at the fine print. I'm like, oh, okay, like this is not something I should be accepting as gospel or as, actual like textbook information here, right? I like to think that I have a bit of experience in terms of weeding out some of the information only because, working in broadcasting and working in media, not that I was ever a news person. Like the closest I ever got to that was reporting on air traffic. But I've never done a newscast. Like maybe when I was in college, but I've never been that guy. But that being said, I always have huge and have had and continue to have massive respect for news anchors, reporters, broadcasters, for credible outlets, because that is not only a difficult job, can be pretty grim, and I don't know how that just doesn't suck everything out of you every day. That being said, we have to watch our sources. We have to be aware of it, and especially when we get into these debates. And I'll be honest with you, like over the weekend, I did find myself in a little bit of a heated discussion with a family member.
Yeah, which isn't uncommon, right? I think we've all, and we talked about that on our podcast about going home for Easter, going home for the holidays, right? We all knew that these conversations were going to start coming up. And as much as we prepared for them, they can be personal and they can be painful. And unfortunately, again, you could face maybe some ignorance, right? Some like misinformation. So yeah, do you want to share a little bit about what your
Well,
experience was like, at least how it like sat with you?
I think the thing is that it kind of goes back to what I was talking about, how recently, at least with myself, and I don't know if you find this with your circle of family and close friends as well. And please share if you do, or if you don't. But I think that like sometimes I think we can feel that we are, especially for myself, being LGBT, accepted, loved, embraced, and celebrated, with those who are around me, right? And I'm sure you've seen some things online where it's like, consider who you're voting for, that they will also love who you love, and this sort of a thing. Like I'm not using the exact wording of some of these
Mhm.
memes or posts that I've seen. Again, check your sources. But I think it's like when you get into the nitty gritty about what not just like the parties, but like with what we as individuals stand for, and it actually, enjoy the promo, but it made me think of a conversation that we had had on this podcast about relationships, which I believe was our last episode about love isn't enough.
Mhm.
And it's like a lot of this I'm finding has to do with values. And I'm
Mm.
someone that I've come from a very supportive family, a very supportive immediate family and extended family and friends and close friends. I'm very thankful that I've had that. But I think that when people have different views on things, or even like values are different in terms of priority, like this outweighs this, some people might think of, maybe other people might be more concerned about what will affect them immediately. And so, I mean, yeah, it was a heated discussion. Um, and it kind of left me feeling a little bit tired, a little bit stressed, a little bit exhausted, a little anxious, and then feeling like I don't know, like in a way, kind of feeling a little bit alone, right? In that sense, I don't know. I really don't want to get into the specifics of exactly what happened, as much as I know we are unfiltered and all that here, and I pride ourselves on that. But I just think that if you followed anything I post on social media over the last many years, and you know that I advocate for our community, the LGBTQ plus community. I believe that that's not just about supporting that community, but like their rights, our human rights. And to me, that is so important. And I think that not that that's the only issue, but I feel the intensity of it in terms of when views are opposing.
Yeah. I love that you said though the idea of the values, right? Because for you, this is such an important value that you, again, like respect and love all humankind, however they present, right? And then for other people, unfortunately, their value is different. And they think, like, well, I would rather vote for someone that's going to quote unquote, again, fix the finances or fix the budget. And I don't care what their personal views are on this topic. Right. And again, our values they're not compatible. Right. And so, of course, there's going to be those like really triggering conversations because you're thinking like, well, this value seems more important than balancing the budget, right? This is about like
Right.
humankind and this is about loving people and being supportive and encouraging of who they are. And for other people, it's like, no, money is like the top value and we have to figure this out instead. Right. So it's a hard place to be, especially when they people that again, maybe you wouldn't have thought think that way, right? Or you're surprised by why they post or who they like support. It's an interesting time when you see like what people maybe are actually like behind closed doors, right?
I would agree, and I think that the other thing is too is just to give people as much of a who are watching and listening to our Spill the Tea podcast right now. I don't want you to think that it. I don't believe. I mean, grocery costs, cost of housing, cost of living, all of those things are extremely important to me and have affected me. I think most people, no matter what your financial status is, what your background is, have struggled in their own ways in the last couple of years. And if not with that, then with mental health. And then if not with that, then with something else. Like it's called the game of life, right? For a reason. There are
Mhm.
peaks and there are valleys. Even you and I have had conversations offline where, and we kind of laugh at ourselves, where it's like you'll be posting something on your personal Instagram, I'll be posting something on mine, but then the rawness of it all truly comes out in those private conversations with your partner, your close friends, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, right?
Yeah.
And I think that everyone has a story. And it doesn't mean that you don't love people who have different views. I mean, some people may choose to set those boundaries a little more structured than others,
Mhm.
but it's just I'm more so talking about here. You have that moment, you have that conversation, you didn't see it coming, and it leaves me feeling a certain way. It leaves you feeling a certain way. So Maria, you're the therapist on this podcast here. What do I do when we have? What do I do when you step away and you take a look back and you think about that conversation? How can I protect my own peace and carry on?
I love that question because it encompasses kind of that idea of we had a difficult situation and then we're like, what do we do with this, right? Like, how do we heal from it? How do we move on from it? And like, how do we not just distract away from it? Because we do that, right? We do kind of just like, okay, well, that person, I'm just gonna like throw them away. I'm gonna distract and I'm not gonna engage. I think one thing that comes to mind is also advocating and like even going back to the same person and saying, hey, even if it's a message, an email, whatever it is, or a phone call,
Mhm.
being able to just like say the like what you felt after that conversation, I think is really important because I think we kind of get stuck in that like the person didn't understand me or the person isn't seeing what I'm seeing or I'm not sure the person understood how this affected me personally, right? Because the other thing too is not all of these topics are personal for everyone, right? So, as someone that identifies as part of the community, for you, that's something that touches your heart deeply. For someone that maybe doesn't identify as part of the community, then for them, it's just like another like hot topic that we're talking about off the cuff, right? So, it's that differing like personal depth. I would actually engage in a conversation just telling them how it made you feel and see what they come up with and see if you can kind of fix that like broken like little tinge, right, that we're feeling so that next time you see them, it's not awkward and uncomfortable. And it's not always like playing in the back of your mind, right?
Honestly, that's great advice. The interesting thing is, and there is a chance that he could see this at the end of the day, which I'm fine with, and I've only shared so much of it for a reason because of that. It's one of those things where it's like I will say after we had kind of had I wouldn't say an argument, I would say like a heated debate, a heated conversation. Um, he had definitely made a point of saying that he loved me and he went to hug me, and I could kind of tell that that was felt that way. But and I'll be completely honest with you, like I still love and respect my family member, but I was like, I'm not there yet. You know what I mean? Like I'm just not. I need a minute. I need a minute. I'm still here. I wasn't at home, so it was like I was like if I, maybe if I could have, I would have stepped out at that moment. But
Yeah.
also being around lots of different family members, I didn't want to cause, believe it or not, like I didn't want to cause a scene, right? Like I just wanted to kind of keep it and kind of I internalized it myself, and I was like, okay, you know what? I feel like I'm better than I was like the next day. Like honestly, the next day I felt a lot better about it. And it's just it's one of those things that I think I share this. I share a little bit of this story because I feel like I know I'm not alone. And I think that it's something that's okay to talk about here, because if you have been through something like this before with a family member, with a friend, and it's not that you can't necessarily have a relationship with people who have different views than you do, what values than you do, opinions. It's just trying to navigate that, depending on what that relationship is. You want that person to still be in your life. What's the where do they land? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? Like, is that a fair way to walk away from that?
I think so because I think what you're also explaining is kind of that idea of like we have different tiered kind of family members or tiered family, friends, even relationships, right? Like there's things that we find really important. It's like, well, then you're not in this like close circle with me, like defending this, and like you're not like a diehard with me, like my ride or die, right? And then there's other people that are just a little bit further away, and you can either say like, I want you as part of my life, even though we don't see eye to eye on this topic, or you know what, I don't actually think we can like align on this, and the way that you handle your life is not something that I want in my life, right? It's about setting those appropriate boundaries and communicating through it. But it's okay to kind of carry that energy for a couple days, but then also like allowing yourself to advocate for what you believe in, and then
Yeah.
having the conversation to maybe heal from that after, right?
I think the thing is too, is with this election, and I like the fact that we're having this conversation, but yet we're not necessarily uh I don't think this conversation has been too in your face about this topic. Like, I think it's been very open, and anyone could be listening to this or watching this and relate in their own ways, even if, views are polar opposite from either one of the views on the show, which again, I know what this episode's about, but we really don't like to get political. But I just think that that's just, now it's beyond being political. It's just a part of the world that we're living in 2025 and existing as humans, right?
Which is
Um,
crazy to think that in 2025 we're having these conversations, or that we have to have these conversations still. It seems like that's still, and I know I say this every time we bring this up, but it still seems baffling to me that in 2025 we're still having these ridiculous conversations that we all fought to stop having.
It is so true. And I think that everyone, no matter, and this is very widespread, but everyone can learn from the experiences. They can learn from other people, right? And I'm sure that even myself, believe it or not, I can learn from how I react. I know, in a heated debate with somebody, especially somebody who's close to me and my family, right? Believe it or not, you know what? There's not a halo up here above my head. But I think that one of the things that I found helped me sort of process this after it had happened was, a couple of things. First of all, yesterday I was in Toronto. I went for a walk. I actually went to my friend's record store. He had, I was picking up something from there. And then I went and I grabbed a coffee, and I was just like, again, going on a walk and enjoying the sunshine. And then, I've always found music for me to be so therapeutic. Not that it should replace actual therapy, but I do find that it's like good at home personal therapy. Like if I'm not working, or even when I am working, if I'm not watching something on TV or talking to someone, like I feel like I wouldn't have survived this far in life for me without music, right? Like it's just been such a part of every aspect of my life. And I've heard other people say that as well. And then I woke up today and I had a conversation with another friend and kind of told them a little bit more about the details about this. And I was like, okay, like just feeling a little less isolated, a little less alone with how I was feeling. And I don't know, that just kind of like that really helped. I don't know if that makes sense the way I'm explaining on the podcast, but I hope that it does.
No, I think it does. I think also you can feel very alone when you're the only one advocating for something, right? Especially when like some of us do go to our family, like our family reunions or family dinners, or maybe we're surrounded by coworkers or friends that think differently than we do. It can feel very isolating, because then you also start thinking, it's like, am I the one that's wrong? Are they all right? Especially when we're like surrounded by that type of conversation. I know that I've felt it many times at dinner tables where I'm seen as different because of the career that I do, right? And I'm seen as kind of more like liberal or radical when it comes to like sexuality and sex and relationships. And so you sit there and you're like, am I the one that's like completely out to lunch right now? Are they right? And so you start questioning yourself, right? And so it can feel like you walk away from that and you're just like, oh gosh, I feel so alone because I was the only one advocating for this. But I will say, good for you for doing it, and good for you for standing up for the community.
Here's the thing, what I will say, I want to go back to your point a little bit here, is I'll tell you a little bit of behind the scenes tea about us doing this podcast before we even started it. I don't know if we've talked about this, but when I was telling people that I wanted to do a podcast, and I was sharing with them that I wanted to do it with you, and so first place I went was your Instagram, and they're seeing, okay, registered therapist, sex therapist, and they're seeing some of the posts because of maybe what I was putting out there in my personal brand with my radio career on social media. People were like, oh, like, do you think that you should be like doing this with her? because
Yeah.
yes, you kind of talked about these topics in your radio show or maybe posted about it on social media, but she kind of it puts it out there. And I was like, well, yeah, like I've worked with this person. Like she's, at that point, I mean, we had more so worked together. I wouldn't say we had fully become friends yet.
Yeah.
So I was confident in that, right? But like people will kind of hear and see things and make those assumptions. And then, I mean, now this is still a baby podcast. And I don't want to brag, but I mean, we have had the people that have been so gracious to follow us and listen to us say that we're having some good conversations, and they feel that we connect well together. And I mean I agree, and I think that it's just like, I know I'm all about opening your mind and opening your heart to those situations. I just wanted to say that, and I also wanted to say before we get to the spill the tea question, back to what you do in your profession when you're not on this podcast is you had posted something yesterday, which I gladly reposted, and the timing couldn't have been better, about how much of a toll, the political talk, the election, and beyond today, like this is just the beginning, can take on your mental health. So if someone is listening to this right now and they haven't reached out for help, where should they go first? Where should they start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that question. Yeah, I think anything is like, if you're really struggling right now, obviously if there's like a crisis, then there's always crisis lines available in Canada, US, really worldwide. And so you can just do a quick Google and do like crisis lines. But if you're looking for a therapist that aligns with you, there's a great website called Psychology Today, and you can look up like through filters of like therapists that align with your views and your values and what you'd want to like work on. And I would say like that's probably your best bet to start there.
I think that's great advice. I just think that was worth mentioning on the actual podcast itself, because there's just been so much about that on social media and about that in the news and in the headlines. I think that maybe if someone is listening to this and they're, not sure where to start, I think that we're happy to kind of help them in any little way that we can. And then, of course, as you can always send us a DM on
Yeah.
social at the Spill the Tea Pod, which actually takes us to our Spill the Tea question today.
Oh, let's hear it. I'm actually really curious about this one because it's a little bit less of the sex spicy and more of the political spicy.
If political, well, I mean, okay, you said spicy. Yes, it can be spicy. It was like political sexy. I don't know.
I don't know. Some politicians have some like pretty like sexy lifestyles. So
Or we find about them afterwards, don't we?
we do. I would love to be the therapist of a politician. I'm sure
Oh
we
my
get all the
God.
tea.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'd only want you to be that if you could tell me afterwards, but I know you can't. Confidentiality reasons,
Yeah.
right? But
No, that would be my own private tea at that point.
oh, killing me. Okay. So this says, hey, Will and Maria, is it even worth arguing with someone who's, they wrote, political opinion denies your basic rights? Or is it better to save your energy and your edges? Which is interesting because kind of, sort of, in a roundabout way, maybe not specifically. We've been chatting a little bit about that today on the show. What do you think? I mean, do you think that it's worth having that conversation? Because it can take a lot out of us.
Yes, I think that the first thing I would say is first check your own energy and see where you're at emotionally. Are you able to do this? Are you able to expend energy and emotional like bandwidth to actually have these conversations? That would be my first like stop. My second stop would be, who are you having this argument with, and are they worth the time and effort and energy that you're about to expend? And I mean that in like the sense of like, are they open and curious, or are they just looking for a fight? Because if someone's just looking for a fight, and I say this even in like relationships, talking about anything, if someone's looking for a fight, then there is going to be no conversation. That's not a dialogue. That's just an argument with like aggression. If someone's open and curious, like if someone came to you after our conversation today, Will, and said like, hey, I'd really like to know more about how you stand on this, and I'm really curious about how you got there, and I would like to learn, that's a wonderful dialogue to have with someone. But if somebody comes at you and is attacking your view, and they just continuously put down what you have researched and what you know and what you believe in your heart, that's not an argument worth having. That's something that you just walk away, because they're not open to actually having a conversation and they're not curious. And I love that idea of like staying curious. And I would stay curious even with people that think differently than I do. Open yourself up to the conversation, but this person says like that they're like arguing, that sounds more aggressive to me, and that person's not willing to have a real conversation.
And that's the thing. If that person is just arguing with you for the sake of arguing, because let's be honest, I think we most of us know someone like that, unfortunately, in our
Mhm.
own lives who thrives off of arguing, who thrives off of drama, who
Mhm.
just, always wants to have some turmoil on the go. Like I've had those people in my life as well, and they are exhausting. They're a lot to deal with, right? And if
Mhm.
you are passionate about, you could be passionate about iced coffee. And maybe the person that you're having the conversation is with is like, no, you know what? I cannot stand iced coffee. I only drink warm coffee. You're probably never going to be able to convince them to get a delicious vanilla cream cold brew. Like that's probably just not going to actually be a thing, right? Also, I think you have to think about, for me, like you said, your emotional energy, where you're at that day. But how many times have you had an argument or a conversation with that individual? If you keep having the same conversation and it's like a broken record over and over and over again, you state your opinions, facts, research, they state theirs, and you're clashing and clashing and clashing, you're
Mhm.
just going to be kind of, in a sense, although they might be arguing with you, you're kind of doing it to yourself a little bit, right? Because you know what that aftermath is going to be, and then you're going to be you'll be doing so many walks around the blocks on sunny days with coffee in your hands, you're not going to even be able to know what you're doing. So I think that you have to like think about that, and just think about, honestly, even what that person's relationship is with other people, because that plays into it too.
I agree. I love the coffee analogy though, because it's true. Like, I think what's important is if you like iced coffee and the other person doesn't like iced coffee, is the other person without the iced coffee still allowing you to love your iced coffee? And are they curious about why you like iced coffee? And are they at least willing to try it? Right? Like, I think all of those things, like, it opens up the conversation, the dialogue. But you're right though. If you have a conversation or an argument constantly about the same thing with the same person, you are putting yourself in that situation on your own. Like now at this point, like take responsibility for taking yourself out of that conversation and being like, this is not going to go anywhere.
It's not going to go up, down. It's just going to go sideways. And I think that that's something to consider. And I think that there is even above and beyond. I know we've had a little bit of focus here, at least when I was sharing things about like the LGBT community and how it can be hard. And, but it's hard for everyone. It's hard for, doesn't matter who you're voting for, what you believe, what you don't believe. It's been a hard world for a long time for a lot of people, and I think that's something to consider and to take those breaks, right? And I mean, typically we're where you can go for a break. But hopefully you got something out of this today, and hopefully that this time is not too exhausting. And honestly, things that make me happy, find those things that make you happy when you're stressed, like whether it is, from a professional sense, going to therapy, doing all of those things, but also play your favorite song, watch your comfort show, grab that iced coffee, go for a walk, go to spin class, as I know, Maria, you like to do, right?
Yeah.
Have a night with your girlfriends, like whatever it is, don't forget those things, because those are the things, and I know it's cliched, but those are the things that are going to make you happy. And find someone to hug.
Oh, I love that. Is that your last tip? Find someone to hug.
That's going to be my last tip, because honestly, I always feel better when I get a hug from a loved one, for the most part.
Yeah, that's
For the most part, yeah. If I love them, then yes. I think that that's a real thing. I mean, do you have a last sip, or was your last sip kind of in there too?
I think my last tip is to stay curious and stay open. And also, whatever happens, I know tonight, but I mean, everyone's going to be listening to this later on in the week. But I think whatever happens with the elections, know that you still have full autonomy and control over your life and your choices as well as your behaviors. So take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, stay curious, and don't allow yourself to spiral out of control with whatever the election holds for us. You still have power and you're allowed to use it.
Okay, I love that, but can I be silly for just 1 second?
I guess, fine.
As you're giving your last sip, I could not help but think of the legend, the icon, Jerry Springer. His sort of final thought was, take care of yourself and each other. And I mean, that's the best way to end this podcast, right? Is on a silly, stupid note.
Amazing. I love that.
Thank you so much for listening and for watching the Spill the Tea podcast with Will and Maria. You can follow us on social at the Spill the Tea Pod. Don't forget to rate us 5 stars, subscribe so you get the episode as soon as it drops. We appreciate you. And that's the tea.
That's it for this episode of Spill the Tea. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us for more candid conversations. Got a burning question or topic you want us to cover? Slide into our DMs. We're always here to spill the tea. Follow us on socials at the Spill the Tea Pod, at Will Nash on Air, and at Sex Off the Pedestal.